Hi, I'm Debbie Dane, Executive Director at WilliNet, and today I'm at Town Hall with Town Manager Jason Hoch as we begin Episode 2 of Town Hall Talk, a monthly conversation about the business around the municipal happenings. Welcome.
Thank you for coming back.
On our agenda today, let's look briefly at old business and then look ahead to some new business. It's a busy season with the Finance Committee started its work. We have an election day coming up with a debt exclusion vote around the high school building project. Planning board is very busy. It's got 2 important zoning considerations. So we'll cover all those topics and maybe a little more. We left off last month with the Community Preservation Committee, of which you are a member. A lot of applications for worthy projects. Bring us up to date on what's happened since we were last here.
I think when we were last here, we were gearing up for it, but I think maybe the second meeting of that committee, we had a lot of applications, and so the applicants made an initial presentation. They had an opportunity then, based on questions and input from the committee, to revise and update and provide additional information. So that was our last meeting in January. We've now sort of had a time to digest all of that. And the committee will be meeting on the 23rd of February to actually review which projects have merit and qualifications that we feel to go forward, and then figuring out how we allocate the available money right there. Right now, if every application that was received came through and was funded at their full request, we'd be bumping up against just about what we have wholly available for this. That said, I think at the end of the last meeting of the committee, we took kind of a straw poll to see what people's thoughts were, and there were a couple projects that it looks like it may be challenging to get a positive vote to move forward. And that's the nature of the beast in all of these. You want to hear everybody, give them a fair shake, and sometimes projects are ready and sometimes they're not ready or they're not a good fit. So I think we'll know a lot more after the 23rd, and then those that the committee chooses to go forward with, then the work actually comes back into my desk a little bit to craft all of those into warrant articles, as town meeting still votes on these. The committee isn't the end-all, be-all. So we'll come back, craft the warrant articles, and then there'll probably be one more meeting in March to go forward and have the committee bless those articles.
And there's currently 9 active applications.
There are 9 active applications. I think
one withdrawal.
Right, when we met last time, there was a heightened level of interest around the possibility of a dog park in South Williamstown. Subsequently to that meeting, the proponents of the dog park withdrew that application, so that's taken us down to 9 applications now.
Excellent. Finance Committee, headed by Mike Sussman, began meeting this Wednesday, 7:30, as they will do for the next 5 Wednesday nights. Town presented Budget Part 1. Why don't you bring us up to date on how do we look financially?
I think we on the town end are in good shape. We presented a balanced budget showing that we had no need to exceed the 2.5% cap. On my end, this was my first cycle working with staff here on it. Got really good budgets. There's a good process here. There's been a good process for years that Peter had in place, the budget committee had, staff had. So it didn't require any radical changes. We had good numbers back. We put that we were very comfortable with. Nothing dramatically different in our operations. Basically, the level of service we provide is the level of service we provide. We have some places, where you adjust a little bit because maybe we're spending a little bit more on electronics. Maybe we're shifting, a little bit from overtime to part-time, or adjust some of those things within the budget. Obviously, this winter, it should come as no surprise that we have a little savings from this winter. So the way that we handle accounting for that has led us it actually impacts next year's budget. Not to get into the weeds too much on this, but we budget a certain amount each year for winter maintenance. In the years that we have more than that, say last year, you remember last February, which is wildly different than this February, we have the ability to carry over a certain amount of that overage as a separate overage out of next year. So we carry that allowance. Well, I need less allowance because, unless the world ends in the next 6 weeks, I think we'll be okay within our existing budget. So overall, I think we're in really good shape. I think we had a really good constructive first meeting with the committee outlining big picture where we were and our general level of comfort, maintaining operations and maintaining some of the things the town has developed a really good process of setting aside funds for things, you know, for being responsible, sort of in stabilization funds or future pension liability. So continuing those practices as well.
And how did health insurance do, and how about rate of increase?
Yeah, health insurance is always a challenge.
It's
I mean,
awful.
we saw about a 14% increase this year.
Yeah.
Now, there was at least some glimmer of good news on that, in that the Berkshire Health Group, the regional group that we work with, identified an opportunity to assist some of our retirees and change their prescription coverage that actually generally meant no major changes in terms of on-the-ground experience for our retirees, but it was a cost savings for us. So we were able to offset some of the dollar savings that way.
So what are we looking at as a percentage increase?
We're looking at about a 2 to, for health insurance,
No, for-
14.
for-
Okay, overall big picture budget, we're looking at the 2.5%.
Excellent.
Based on what we know now. So nothing, again, nothing radical.
And you'll report, so next week, is it library? Who
Okay, this past week we did Council on Aging, Community Development, Police, Finance, and Executive Administration. Next week will be Library, Public Works, our other big ticket items. So.
Excellent, great. Well, that's good news.
And it was wonderful. You know, it was nice that for our first meeting, the committee sort of was constructive. You could see, you know, it's sort of the first meeting of the year, kind of dusting the cobwebs off for all of us.
Binder open.
Right, you know, and so for me, it's sort of that first experience because, you know, every budget and finance committee, there's a different relationship and dynamic, and this was a refreshingly constructive, helpful,
I'm glad you
inquiring relationship, and so I think it's a healthy approach.
The other, of course, important budget centers are the schools that will report in, and they are creating their budgets and having those meetings. How do you interface with that process?
I mean, we pull their numbers into ours. We actually have the conversation because we have to kind of fit their numbers into our overall targets. I think where they are right now is perhaps a little bit beyond the target that we had hoped for. That said, I think there's some really good ways that we can work with them on tightening up some numbers without really changing any further impact out on the ground. And I appreciate the fact, you know, this is an interesting situation. New town manager, new superintendent, both working together.
Yes.
And so I think we both came to this with the philosophy of we want to start the conversation about what we feel is appropriate and what we need. We may ultimately have to dial some of those back to make the numbers appropriate, but we'd rather have the conversation than pretend the issue doesn't exist and then have it pop up down the road.
Well, speaking of the schools, coming up on March 1st, Super Tuesday for the rest of the country, local citizens get to vote for their presidential nominee, both parties, but also there is a town election, local issue of the debt exclusion vote that would allow funding for the new and renovated Montgreylock High School. We have state support, probably reimbursement between 56 to 58 cents on the majority of the project. Lanesboro has to vote March 15th. We vote March 1st. It's a simple majority. Describe what's the language on the ballot. Debt exclusion.
Debt exclusion. So what ends up happening here is because we're part of a regional school district, the actual vote to proceed on the project is not a vote of the town, it's a vote of the regional school district. They took that vote already. They took that vote in January to vote to proceed. They put a condition on it that each town pass a debt exclusion, so which is why we're seeing these two ballot votes. What a debt exclusion allows us to do is take the cost of borrowing and move it to kind of a restricted part of how we calculate a budget. We're obligated under Proposition 2.5 that there's only a certain amount that we can increase taxes, and then there is also an overall cap beyond which we can't tax. So there's a levy limit. What happens with capital projects is if you use all of that space up, you run out of space for the next project or the next issue. So for major projects like schools, there's this concept of debt exclusion, where if the voters support it, again here with the majority vote, you can put that cost over in a side bucket. It doesn't mechanically limit us against that overall cap. I mean, obviously we're not going to go nuts anyway. I mean, the debt the debt adds to your tax bill. We're not going to say, hey, well, we have all this other space, let's tax even more. I mean, that's not, but it creates kind of a safety net in some ways for us. So the vote that each town is having is the debt exclusion vote to move the debt into that place and allow the project to go forward, because that's the condition. So basically, for this to go forward, the question requires a yes vote, because that would be yes, I vote in support of debt exclusion, which is the condition the school committee put on it. Unfortunately, you know, and I appreciate we've had a lot of people already coming in for absentee ballots, and people have seen the sample question. If you go to any town meeting, you know that by the time we meet the legal requirements of what the easiest article is written in language that you and I never use day to day. You know, we don't sit around and talk this way. Now, imagine when it comes time to borrowing money, and you throw a few more lawyers in, and you throw a few more bank people in, the language gets even more complex.
It is.
So it basically, the language basically says, shall we adopt the provisions of debt exclusion relative to so-called Proposition 2.5 relative to the Mount Greylock School District. Nowhere within there is there language, you know.
Do you want to proceed with the building project?
Do you want the project to go forward, yes or no? And I can, you know, you kind of want to put a footnote there saying, you know.
A yes means we move forward, a no means we stop.
So that's the mechanics of it. It's, and it's tough, you know, for the average person who doesn't live in this government bubble.
I thought I was voting on the high school.
Right, why isn't it just yes, no? So that's the technical thing, but the way the process is set up, if you wish this project to continue, a yes vote on the debt exclusion allows this project to go forward.
And that would be March 1st in Williamstown at the elementary school. The polls open at 7, open till 8 p.m. You would get 2 ballots. You'll go and if you want to vote for a presidential candidate of your party, and if you wanted to vote for the high school building project, you'll do 2 things there.
Right, you get 2 separate ballots. And remember, too, I mean, you know, hopefully we're out. And if people are seeing this before March 1st, they can certainly come in here, vote absentee, come see the town clerk.
Right, if you have children away and that are voting age. And March 15th in Lanesboro. So they decided to split the vote there. They will be voting for their presidential candidate on March 1st, but doing this vote on March 15th. So a yes vote means the project goes forward. A no vote means they can go back to the process one more time, but it's not guaranteed we would get in. So this is a very important vote.
I mean, there's some mechanics there. I mean, there is kind of this worst case scenario of, okay, you can vote one more time. There's a window of time, and then I think you go back in line. I do think the other thing that is probably worthwhile to mention here too is that I think it's good to acknowledge that within the past week or so from the time that we're here now, that the Williams College has created an additional fund of $5 million to support this high school project.
But it has nothing to do with the funding of the debt exclusion. It doesn't have separate piles of money. Just to be clear, but
it is because I think what ends up happening is that there are things that aren't even part of this renovation project and the debt that will make a stronger project.
Locally with the elementary school when that was being built, the college has been a great asset.
Right. So you know, again, I appreciate them coming in to be a partner to round out the rest of this project to help.
Let's move on to the selectmen. They met on February 8th and voted unanimously to make a selectman's request for rezoning the downtown business district to the planning board. To describe the process and what this project and what we're referring to, some of us may remember. Bring us up to date.
Okay, I guess one will be sort of again, mechanics of government thing about how planning, how zoning ordinance changes work through the process to get in front of you on the ballot. There's a spot at which everything comes to the Board of Selectmen to then refer to the planning board for their report. So traditionally we're used to the planning board making their own ordinances. And so there's this mechanical step where they come to us and then we say, yep, and send it back to them. And in fact, we had a few of those at that meeting February 8th too. The planning board has a few technical ones that so they brought those, we said yes, we hand them back to them. Other ways that can come in, a citizen petition, we may talk about that. It can come in by request to property owner. It can come actually as a request from the Zoning Board of Adjustment, or one can come as a request of the Board of Selectmen. So those are sort of the different ways that things go back to the planning board to go to a hearing to actually ultimately turn up on your town meeting warrant.
Excellent.
So In this case, what had happened last year is that the planning board had been considering a rezoning of the downtown business district, lining up a bit of the line coming down the western side of Spring Street, and then at the bottom of the street, which is really sort of the major area of conversation, expanding that district by about 550 feet. So it's pushing out.
We haven't named the project yet, which I think is critical.
Sorry.
Let's bring people up to date.
Sure.
On
right. I mean, and the notion for expanding this at the bottom of the street is to create an opportunity for Williams Inn to be relocated in a new building at the bottom of Spring Street.
Built by the college.
Built by the college. And so this had gone through conversation last year at the planning board. The planning board had drafted language and voted unanimously to have it go forward. And so it hit that spot where it was supposed to go to the selectmen and bounce back. That was the spot where we were. And at that point, it was the planning board's recommendation. Before it moved forward, the college asked that it be pulled back. As the dominant property owner affected by this, they asked that hold back as they weren't ready for it to go forward.
Gotcha.
So it kind of sat on a shelf for a year.
Okay.
So this year they dusted it off because the college did.
Yep.
They came to the Board of Selectmen and said, hey, here's the same language. We would like this to go forward. Now, we can go through that doorway. Again, of those multiple doorways, it could have gone through the doorway of the property owner going back to the planning board. But the selectmen also looked at it and said that it was their belief that this proposed inn project is really important for the community.
And lines up with the economic development.
It lines up with a lot of our
goals.
economic development goals, creating activity in the downtown, creating that kind of anchor at the end of the street is really valuable, creating more walkability. People staying at that hotel walk out the front door and walk to Spring Street.
And even
go
though
to
the
our
college
businesses.
owns it, it would be a tax-paying
Well,
entity.
and then from a financial point of view, it goes on the tax rolls, and we also have a hotel tax. So likely a higher room rate and a higher occupancy rate. All of those mean more revenue for us that way. So it's a huge win for us, and certainly some employment.
Okay.
So all of those pieces, it really fit with what the directions the selectmen are trying to pursue as well. So at their meeting in February, they said, you know what, we want this to go forward as our recommendation rather than the property owner's recommendation. So that's why the board voted unanimously to refer it to the planning board as a selectman's request.
And we'll talk about when the planning board meets next and takes this up after we cover one more issue. So now it will be in the planning board's hands. They'll look at it and either make recommendations and turn it into a warrant saying we are rezoning to...
Right, it'll be a distance, and again, it'll be one of those things where the basic mechanics of it are to change the dimensions of the district.
Right.
So it will probably never say in the article this is to accommodate a future Williams Inn.
And it doesn't mean that there will be a Williams Inn there. It's just allowing the college to continue with its planning, its designing, working with trying to create the future for it before...
Right, because ultimately what's going to happen is if that is enabled, you're correct. If town meeting votes for this in May, it doesn't magically mean like shovels in the ground in June. There is the rest of the process remains. So there will, so once there is a real plan, planning board is likely involved, conservation commission's involved, likely a special permit, ZBA. There are no shortage of future hearings about the specific building.
Excellent. So that they will talk about in March, but there's also kind of an interesting thing, a citizens petition that was brought before the planning board. Could you tell us about what that's about?
In that same sort of mechanical, let's hand all these off to the planning board, we also received a citizens petition from the owner of Wabika Golf Course. As you probably can recall, the planning board has been engaged for much of the fall in conversations about a possibility of a hotel at that site. And I think even we talked last time a little bit about the mechanics of what that meant and the challenges of having a golf course and a hotel and what all that meant. Well, I think there was a point at which I think as the planning board continued to study and analyze and scrutinize, nothing had really come to that sort of final resolution. Unfortunately, we have ticking clocks on all of these things. So in order to keep the conversation alive and on a path for this coming year's town meeting, property owner brought forward a warrant article as a citizen petition. The language, to the best of my read, is pretty consistent with sort of the last iteration that the planning board talked about. I think maybe a couple tweaks here or there. So this keeps it moving forward. The planning board will have their hearing on that March 15th. However, in this case, it goes to the ballot.
Because it's a citizen's
Because a citizen's petition. When it comes in as a citizen's petition, it goes through the review processes, but it's basically guaranteed a spot on the ballot.
So what kind of conversation can the planning board have around it? Just whether they endorse it?
Right. Ultimately, they have to choose to, the official language in the law is that a proposed ordinance will be referred to the planning board and they shall make a report.
Okay.
Their report, such as it is, we generally are used to seeing as a recommendation.
Yes.
And so, yes, they will recommend or choose not to recommend. They will identify the issues that they think are there, the concerns, and the like.
So let's just recap, because on March 15th at the elementary school is where they've scheduled the planning board to meet in the auditorium. Two big issues, which have wonderful implications for the town, as maybe a hotel citizen petition just to continue the conversation down at Wabika, and then changing down at the end of Spring Street to allow the college to continue its exploration of building a small hotel at the end of the street.
There is.
So public comment, the planning board will be meeting and discussing on March 15th.
On March 15th. And this covers all of them, so that people who are attending or watching will see a couple other minor ones too that are also the planning board is considering. One is just a real housekeeping one about some of the reorganization of the department in the past year and sort of make sure we call the right people the right things in the ordinance. The next one is reducing some of the burden on home occupations, which is sort of an outgrowth of the EDC report as well. So
EDC Economic Development.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's an outgrowth of that, and then there's a third one, which actually was again a cleanup of something that we just look at and say this doesn't make any sense. The current ordinance, if you read it, considers the sale of bicycles in the same class of vehicle sales as automobiles, boats, and farm equipment.
Oh, the good old days.
Okay, so our sense was that maybe the sale of bicycles can be, a little more user-friendly than that. And there's no sort of hidden like, secret bicycle shops coming to town. I think it simply was, sometimes the ordinance is open on your desk and you look at it and you say, well, that's kind of dumb.
Update, yeah.
And so I really appreciate, Andrew Groff, that was our community development director. This is his exact experience one day. He was leafing through, said, well, that's kind of ridiculous. So we'll have that technical cleanup as well.
Excellent. That's sort of municipal meeting business. The selectmen are not meeting next week, the last week in February. Right,
and just because I know that's a little unusual, probably. So sorry, that may be the impact of new manager. But we had the conversation. I looked at what we had queued up for a meeting. I said I have very little that requires immediate action.
Okay.
So trotting everybody out to approve 2 event permits seemed maybe not the best use of everyone's time.
Especially with other things coming up that people probably want to
learn about. We will have no shortage of issues to deal with soon. Exactly. Said I'm going to need more of their time, and we will have slightly longer meetings. So, get the break while you can seemed like a good idea.
Just a couple of ad hoc items. The Science Center construction is going on, and we have some maybe parking updates.
Yeah, I think there's a couple good things happening there. That process has gone through and been approved. It was a permit in front of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So earlier this month, end of last month, that was approved. In the concerns that most people in the general public will have will be parking. What's it going to mean? So I think one of the good things that was discussed a little bit at that meeting, and pretty impressive actually, that the general contractor will be using a permit-based system for all of their workers and subcontractors. They will have to identify the vehicles and where they're parking. Alternate parking for those construction vehicles has been identified in a document from them. That alternate parking in no way is meant to be on the street or at the parking lot at the end of Spring Street and Walden Street. It is in big bold letters across the top.
I have to say it's a creative
solution. It's a great solution.
It's kind of like with the Clark shuttling people when they were. I mean, I think it's been really shows a good.
There's a
effort.
good commitment, and and so what ends up happening is that they will be able to monitor that if there are violators. It's a really good community-based plan, because there are fines for the first offenses to the company hired. You know, the third offense is you're off the job, but the first couple, but that money then actually goes into
where does that go?
Pool. Well, but no, this is what's so great about it, is that it will be generated. Hopefully there is no money. In one way, everybody complies. But if you don't comply, at least the benefit is all of that fine money goes into a pot, and at the end of the project is donated to a charity in the community.
Oh, excellent.
So
thoughtful.
So if you are aggrieved by improper parking, know at least in some small way a charity in town will benefit from that inconvenience.
And the phones will ring. How do you apply for the money? But we'll talk about that in a couple of months.
Right. And that's not us. We're not fighting them. That's all internally to the college and their contractor. The other thing I just want to point out is that the section of Walden Street between Hoxie Street and Spring Street, which has been one way, we expect will be opening back up to be two ways. And some of that is just because as the south building on the Science Center is built, there will be construction traffic and all sorts of things, and two-way traffic will be safer for everybody there.
And then I have a question, just looking around on the street, Main Street, between Greylock Federal Insurance and the Minerva Flea Market. A bunch of those houses have been taken down. And that area has been talked about for a couple of uses, and just wondered what you might know.
Yeah, it has been discussed in the past as possible location for public safety facility or fire, or as that whole conversation has had various iterations over the years. So again, with a little bit of cleanup and activity there, it's kind of refreshed the view and conversation about it. No immediate action on it. I mean, I think, to be fair, in some ways, though, over the coming year, we need to think about, that site included or aside, we will be having more of that conversation. In some ways, that has been shelved until we got through the high school project and knew what the implications are, and now we have a better sense. So
terrific. And then we end on town elections are May 10th. Looking ahead, we're talking about it now because nomination papers, if you have any interest, are due March 22nd. We have some selectmen seats. We have seats on the planning board, the library, the elementary school. McCann has a seat. So March 22nd, if you're looking to serve the town, take out your papers. Is it 28 signatures? I think it's 28.
Yeah, I think that's
Bridget Spann, who's I can't single out people. Library. Anyway, it's a great way to serve your town. There's lots of different types of opportunity. So that would be seeing Mary Kennedy, our town clerk, getting the papers and getting them back in by March 22nd. Jason, this has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I think we'll talk after the planning board.
Yes.
Of March 15th. We hope everyone votes March 1st.
Yes.
And this has been Town Hall Talk with Jason Hoch. I'm Debbie Dane, Executive Director at WilliNet. We'll see you in a month.